All right. Part 2 of Office Hour. We are now recording. We're looking at problems. So, did I
You
throw a lag
froze.
there?
Oh, there you
Okay,
go.
we good?
You're alive.
Yeah. Yeah, that was weird. Okay. So what'll happen is, again, you're going to have typically you're going to have some sort of technical challenge. So there are some companies that don't whiteboard. You can actually Google them. Companies that don't whiteboard challenge. And so hiring without whiteboards. Whoa. Bummer. I don't know what that is. Yeah, so there are some that don't do this that you can look into. But what will typically happen is you'll have to do something again called a whiteboard challenge. Yeah, there was unicorn crystal. And what that is you're typically going to have 3 questions that you will answer, and you're going to have 60 minutes to answer them. Now, they're going to be probably a little more challenging than this. We're going to work our way up. But this is what it's going to look like. Again, I interviewed for Starbucks, and we actually used HackerRank itself. They just, whenever we signed up yesterday, you can see that it said for companies or for developers, they use it themselves. And so really, I just got a curated question or 3 questions from this exact view. And so what I want is maybe for us just to get familiar with what this is going to look like. So that way you guys can understand, we can start thinking through questions, how we could do this and kind of hone in our approach. So each question will typically have something like this. You're going to have a prompt, right? You're going to have a prompt that asks you some sort of question. Sorry, I was seeing that GitHub is doing the same thing. I wonder if it's down. That's interesting. Hopefully not another CrowdStrike issue. But okay, so you're going to have some sort of prompt, something you're going to have to answer. These can be as easy as this. They can be challenging as well. I had one for a company called Palantir. Palantir is a data company, like government data. They're like, I don't know. It's kind of an ethical thing on if I'd want to work for them or not, because they're kind of in the background. They make money on, yeah, weird. But theirs was intense. It was like, hey, we give governments, critical information. So here's your hypothetical. There is a volcano that's erupting. Here's all of these nodes in these different places. You need to figure out which houses are the most susceptible to getting burned down via the eruption and the lava flow. Here's your constraints, right? So, these people's lives are in your hands. That stuff, isn't typically how it goes, but it can be something like that, right? This one is just Alice and Bob. Each created one problem for HackerRank. A reviewer rates the 2 challenges, awarding points on a scale from 1 to 100 for 3 categories: problem clarity, originality, and difficulty. The rating for Alice's challenge is the triplet A. So it's going to be A of 1 or 0, A of 1, A of 2. And the rating for Bob is the triplet B. So B of 0, 1, 2. All just looking at this, you might say, whoa, what's going on? Think about this just as an array, just as a list. We know how this is. Position 0, position 1, position 2. The task is to find their comparison points by comparing A of 0 with B of 0, A of 1 with B of 1, and A of 2 with B of 2. If A of I is greater than B of I, meaning that Alice's point in that comparison for problem clarity is higher than Bob's point for problem clarity, then Alice is awarded 1 point. On the inverse, Bob is awarded 1 point, and if they're the same, neither receives a point. Comparison points is the total points a person earned given A and B determine their respective comparison points. Okay. That's sort of like a little bit heavy. All we're doing is they're saying, hey, we're going to give you 2 values, A and B, right? Given A and B, meaning that there's going to be a function that takes in 2 parameters, A and parameter B, and you need to determine their respective comparison points, meaning that we just need to do some calculations, some comparisons, and see who is better or who wins this. Here, this is a lot of words to kind of describe what they're doing, but try to peel out and look for things that are similar to what you know. Again, you know, position 0, position 1, position 2, that's something familiar with you. If we're going to go through and compare these, what are we likely going to use? What allows me to go from here, then to here, then to here?
Map or a for loop?
A loop.
Both of, yeah, exactly. We could do either one of those, right? And so we know, okay, we're going to have a for loop. Okay, cool. This is kind of making a little bit more sense, right? I'm going to iterate through here. I'm going to compare this value with this value. I'm going to give some sort of score. And then I'm going to go to the next one, right? It's going to be from this value to this value, compare, give some score, this value to this value. Great. Cool. We know what's happening. Then it will give you some sort of example where it says, okay, hey, given 1, 2, and 3, and 3, 2, and 1, for elements 0, meaning the first one, Bob is awarded a point because 3 is bigger than 1, right? For the equal ones here, no points are earned. And then for the elements 2, so this last one, Alice gets it because 3 is bigger than 1. The return array. So in reading this, I'm saying, okay, after my function is done, I am returning an array with 2 values. The first value is going to be Alice's score, and the second value is going to be Bob's score. Cool. Then it's going to keep going into more information where complete the function in the editor below has the following parameters: int a3 or a of 3, meaning that there's going to be 3 values within a, which is an integer, and b, right? Or 3, sorry, there's going to be 3 integers within this. Cool. Now, these values or this continued information just is providing more information for what's going on. But I think we have a pretty good idea of what we're trying to do, right? We're going to go and we're going to compare and we're going to return an array back to them. Now, there is some constraints, which we'll talk about here in a second. But what will typically happen is you want to, there's going to be somebody with you, right? There's going to be either somebody on the screen with you, or there's going to be somebody in, if you're in office, they're going to be in office with you. They're not just like leave you by yourself. What you don't want to do is just go start coding immediately. You don't want to do that because they want to see how you think, right? That's like the biggest advice. They don't want to see, and recruiters will say this, engineers will say this, a 10x developer, somebody who just like, born knowing all things about code, isn't always the best person that they want to hire, though they might be a much better developer than all of us combined. They might not work well, or might not be able to articulate the code or the things that they're doing. And so what they're wanting you to do is to articulate what you're thinking. So if I was doing this, I'd say, okay, great. Yep, I've read through it. So from the first standpoint, what it sort of seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, is we are iterating through, you're saying words like, hey, I'm going to iterate through these lists and I'm going to compare each value. And if there's a value, then I want, or if there's, a comparison, if they win or if they don't win, at the end, I'm going to return their total score. You say like, great, cool. Now, again, you don't want to just start coding. You want to start asking some questions. This is where you really hammer out every question you can ask. You don't have to be super exhaustive because remember, you've only got 60 minutes. So it is a fine line of, you don't want to just like talk all the time and only be able to do one. But you want to make sure that you're not just like, cool, read it, done, here you go. I didn't tell you anything about my thought process. So I would say something like, okay, so it seems like I'm going to iterate through and I'm going to compare, I'm going to give that back. I see that, some constraints is that it's got to be greater than 1 and less than 100. What would you like me to do? So this would be a great question of an edge case, right? Saying, what would you like me to do if I do get a value? Is that something that you can, you're not worried about any sort of negative values? You know all the data is going to be within 1 or 100? Or would you like me to build in something to check and say, well, if it's less than 1, if it's greater than 100, you want me to do something? And if so, what would you like me to do? That's what we call an edge case, right? And so thinking through that stuff, and they're saying, they're seeing, okay, you're not just solving the problem, but you're thinking about the problem as a whole, right? Cool. So I think we kind of know this, and are thinking through how to do this. Sort of makes sense. So I think it would be awesome if we actually coded this out. So it'll be just like this. Again, we're not using ChatGPT. We're not going to have anything. We are just going to good old fashioned code this out. Now, the first thing I would likely do is I would do something called pseudocode, right? I'll do pseudocode. Again, this is a way to kind of help them see you, or see how you think. So now that we've understood the constraints, we've understood the problem, let's actually go and figure out and talk about how we're going to approach that. So what do you guys think the first step is in solving this issue? What would I do in actually coding this out? What would you guys do?
Well, we're gonna need a for loop in there or something to iterate through those arrays.
Yeah.
We need a couple if statements too.
Yeah.
Would you go as
They-
detailed to say we're going to create a function?
Already the function
Yeah,
does these
so
things.
normally I would. Great idea. Because it's already here and you're just kind of,
Oh, yeah.
they'll typically have that function, then I wouldn't. But yeah, normally if nothing was done, yes, Jason, I am very granular where I'll say, create a function that takes in 2 values, right? Because it's already there in pre-built, you don't have to.
Maybe have a couple variables for the respective scores because we're gonna have to return those, right?
Yeah.
So
Anybody that hasn't talked yet, what else would we need to do?
Return.
Yeah, what am I returning?
Compare. We're gonna compare. I mean, I'm pretty sure we got everything, but yeah.
Yeah, what am I returning?
The array with 2 values. One is the first is Alice's, second is Bob's.
Yep.
It's always gonna be that way.
Cool. Okay. I think that's pretty good, right? We're kind of thinking through and saying, okay, I know I'm going to iterate through. I know I'm going to create conditional statements to determine winners and losers. I would probably put that here and I would indent it because, I know that my conditional is going to be within my for loop. I know I'm going to need to create some variables to keep track of the scores, and I know I need to return. Oops. Cool. Is this the order that I want to do things in? I also see create and instantiate result. Yeah, we could create a variable. Is this the order that I want to do everything in?
No, I think you have to start from the creating a result variable and instantiate it to become first.
Okay, so create result
Before-
variable. First, is that it? Now, is this in the perfect order?
Write your for loop.
Yeah, we'll have that for loop. Oops.
I think
We'll have
we'll
the for
want to
loop.
do the 2 scores after that before we loop through.
Yeah, why is that, Shane? Why would we want to do that?
If they're inside the for loop, it's just gonna keep resetting.
That's exactly right.
I've done that a
That's
million
exact-
times
yeah.
and it drives me insane.
Yeah, that's exactly right, right?
Both
If
of
we
their
did it
variables at
with,
the top.
yeah, exactly, Austin. If we did it within the for loop, every time the loop goes and reruns the next iteration, it's gonna redeclare or reassign that variable to 0, right? And so that's gonna be the issue there. So great. I think that this is a perfect sort of way to approach this, and we can pseudocode it. So let's actually go build this out. So I'm going to say something like let result equal this, right? What else could I say? I shouldn't have typed that. I want us to do this as a group. What else am I gonna do? So we've already done this one.
Let Alice or A score is equal to 0. Underscore, yeah.
Yeah. Technically I will do this wrong. I'm just letting you know now. JavaScript, we should do it this way, but I am very common, like I commonly would do underscore. It's not gonna break it, but you should do, it's called Pascal case. Or camel case.
Yeah,
Okay,
camel case, yeah.
and then
Now
we
you gotta
got
get
let,
Bob.
yeah, we gotta get Bob. Perfect. Okay, so we've done the first two things. Now I just need to iterate through something. What would I do here? Anybody maybe that hasn't given a ton of just anybody, anybody who hasn't talked to 10 yet. Not that those who have talked, very grateful for that, but. Anybody have an idea? We've done the first two. Now I need to iterate through the values to compare. So first and foremost, how do I iterate through the values?
And
Here.
for I in, and I just took Python, sorry, I'm confused.
So we're gonna use, we could Terran, we could use .map. We'll use the for loop because it's a little bit easier. And those that didn't take React don't know map. But we'll do for let I equal 0. Ben says that we could do I is less than or equal to 3. So I is less than or equal to 3. So is that, and then we'll do I plus plus. What are our thoughts here? Do we think that's gonna work?
Not entirely, you need an if statement in between it, right?
Yeah,
it's
but I'm
a
just thinking
standard,
just
right?
from the for loop, is this going to work?
No,
So-
it needs to be 2. There's
Yeah, it needs to
only,
be
that's
yeah.
my bad.
No, you're good. You're good. That's right. If we did 3 and it was equal to 3, then what we're gonna, kind of looking down the line, we're going and saying of, A of, 0, A of 1, A of 2, A of 3, and it's gonna give us an issue. It's gonna say, hey, that doesn't exist, right?
Undefined.
Yeah, so it's gonna say that doesn't work. Now, what's another way we could do this to make it more dynamic? What if we did some more surveys and all of a sudden we had 5 different values and said, but I wanted this for loop or I wanted this function to work regardless of how many values, 3 or 5 or anything like that.
Length.
Yeah, dot
Yeah,
length,
dot
right?
length, yep.
So I could just say a dot length. Perfect. Great. So we've done our iterations. We can go through that. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to create a conditional statement to determine winners and losers, right? So what can we do here?
If A of I greater than
If A of I
greater than
greater
uh,
than
B
B
of
of
I,
I, yeah,
and then we had to increment the Alice score.
I believe this has to be in a parenthesis.
Yeah, I was gonna catch you on that.
Yeah, sorry, I go back and forth with Python. But yeah,
It's okay.
then we say Alice
Alice score plus equal plus and equal plus 1. Or yeah,
we could also just say plus plus.
Okay.
But let's do plus equal 1. Great. Else. Do we want an else here or what? Do we want to do
Yeah.
anything? Do we want to do anything if they're equal?
It's the inverse for now, right? Else if B is
Yeah.
greater than.
Yeah, so the inverse would be that B is greater than 1, but if we think about it. If I just
Yeah,
do
but-
else here.
Oh, you could just go else.
Yeah, if you
plus-
do an else, if it's
plus
equal,
Mm-hmm,
then you would give a score to the other guy.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
don't
You
get
could
else
you
if,
could
right?
just leave it though. You could just leave it because
Sorry.
nothing would happen to the score.
But you want
Yeah.
Bob to have a score.
So what
Right,
we're
but
what
if
we're
it's
talking about,
equal to each other,
yeah,
you
if
don't
it's
want anything to
equal,
happen.
exactly. So if we just did else, and I just said something like this, Bob score plus plus, or we do plus equals 1. Oof, sorry. I love to write exclamation points because in my emails, I've probably seen that. If I were to do this, well, okay, if A is greater than B, then it's gonna give Alice a score. Anything else, it's gonna give Bob a score. But what happens if they're the same? Right? This says that
still
if they're the
gonna-
same, yeah, exactly. It says if they're the same, no points are earned. But in this case, them being the same is another case outside of this if statement. So it would award Bob the points, right? So we have to have an else if.
Else if Bob's score is equal to, then it's
Mhm.
0. I don't.
And I saw it in there already. We could actually just say continue. And continue is just going to go on to the next one, right? It's just going to go on to the next iteration because that's great. And then now if we get here, we can say Bob score plus equals 1. Cool. So we're iterating through. If A is greater than B or A of I is greater than B of I, then we're going to give Alice the score. If they're the same, we're going to continue because we don't want to do anything, right? And if it gets to this point, then we know, then we know that it's not, A is not greater than B, in this case, or A of I is not greater than B of I, and we know that they're not the same, so the only other option would be that B is greater than A. So we should be good to go.
Hey, Will,
Cool.
if
Yeah.
you did it in the other if you reverse those bottom two, what would you write after else? If you did, if you had the else statement be that they're equal, would you just do else and then leave it blank? Or what would you put right there? You know what I mean?
Oh, if I didn't do this, if I just did the inverse, that's actually a great point, Austin. We don't even need this, right? Because what I could do is I could just say else if B of I is greater than A of I. And then I say Bob score plus equals 1. And then
Then-
you don't need an else, right? You can have an if statement without an else. And so great catch there. We don't even need to confront the equals because it doesn't matter, right? Only it's going to check, hey, if A is greater than B, add 1, or if B is greater than I, and if it doesn't, if it's the same, then it's just going to keep going. It's doing the same thing. We're just writing less code. So great catch there.
Do you still need to continue, or you just go?
Nope, it'll go because what'll happen is it's gonna on the first iteration, I is gonna be 0, so it's gonna check A of 0, and it's gonna say, hey, is A of 0 greater than B of 0? If it is, it's gonna give a score. If it's not, it's gonna come here and say, well, is B of 0 greater than A of 0? Well, it's not. If let's say they're equal, it's not, right? And so then it's just gonna come to this line, and this for loop is done, so it's just gonna go, and it's gonna go, now I is 1, right? So it's not even, it's gonna do the same exact thing as if we actually set out that condition and said continue, they do the exact same thing.
Quick question. Let's say
Mhm.
you have like more than 2 people. Would a switch statement be effective in this scenario? I'm always like almost like not totally sure about switch statements, so I'm just trying to think if this would be like, if we had 5 different people that were scoring, would you do that, or would you just stick with like a if L?
You could, if we were trying to do all of the scores, it would be interesting.
I don't want to get us into the weeds though, so
Yeah.
this seemed like a good time to like use the switch statement as my metaphor, I guess, or my.
Yeah, I wouldn't, let's think about that. I don't think we would need to use a if statement, but we could kind of, or a switch state or switch case, but I don't think so. Let me think about that. We can talk
All
about
good,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, we're at time, so I want to finish this up. we make sure we're at the end of our for loop. Cool. So our for loop's done running. And so now all I have to do is return, or what I can do. Well, there's two things, right? We created result. And so I could then do result. We'll do the long way. Dot push, Alice score. And then do Bob score. And then return result. This would work. We could also just return, you know, an array with Alice score, Bob score, like doing something like this. Does the same thing, right? Just to, instead of having to do this push. And really, when we get in time space complexity, this will be added time that we would do versus doing something like this. Sorry, doing something like this, but it works. Both of them work just fine for what we're doing. Okay, so now what would happen is we finished our code. We think it's good. We think we are good to go. We'd run our code. It's going to process. Cool. So it gave us two test cases where it gave us an input of this, and our output was 1 and 1 because, you know, Alice won this one, Bob won this one, and that's what the expected output was. It gave us another one that was 17, 28, and 30, 99, 16. Our output was 2 and 1. Alice won this one and this one. Bob only won this one, and that was the expected output. So now that it has run through all of our test cases, and sometimes, you know, as you get a little bit more complicated, there might be, you know, 10 test cases or 8 of them. You just submit your code. And then here, once we submit, we have a lot more. Cool. So you can see that they have, in this case, 7 test cases that we work through. Oh. But we've accomplished all of them, all of the different cases, it's handled. And so we are good to go. And we've, in this case for HackerRank, we have solved this problem. Again, just wanted to make sure that you guys kind of get used to this view here on how this works. The last thing, and then we'll get started with class, is you can also see submissions. These are our submissions. And then if you were to go back, there is other things. If you are ever stuck, you can go to this discussions page. I don't know why my Chrome's not showing that. But you can go to this discussions page, and this people will have discussions on how they did it. So you can see how other people did it. Now it's not always in JavaScript though. So it might be in like C or, you know, Java or Python. So there's a lot of different ones. You know, there's 4,000 discussions here. So if you're ever stuck and you're doing it by yourself, you could do it that way and see some discussions and see how other people did it. Or if you did it and you're like, hey, is there another way to do it? You might find it here in the discussions. Sound good? Did that help? Are you guys feeling a little bit more confident? A little bit more comfortable?
That helped.
Cool. Yeah, we'll make sure that we keep doing stuff like this, just so that way you guys get familiar with what this looks like and how we can approach that, the thought process of dealing with that. Cool. I'm gonna stop the recording here.